Aloha everyone, my name is Daniel Veronin, student at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and welcome back to another case study. First things first, happy Turkey Day. This video is posted on Thanksgiving Day, so hope all of you are safe and well, and thank you for tuning in once again. So here we go. So today we are going to be talking about Shopko. Now, Shopko is not your average department store. I covered Toys R Us. I covered Kmart. I've covered Blockbuster Video. Those are chains that were all over the nation at one point or maybe at one point in time. However, with Shopko, there was a certain demographic they were attending to, and not many of you might know. So I knew about this chain before it ultimately closed in bankruptcy before 2019, and I thought it was a pretty interesting chain to look for, to study, because not a lot of people know about it, and I thought it was a pretty unique brand that people didn't really, have their attention towards, and I think it was unique. So here we are making this video for a case study on Shopko. So here we are. Here we are. So the table of contents for this case study. So we'll be looking at the introduction to the case study, what exactly is Shopko, and when we go to that slide of what it is, I'll mention why there's two different spelling variations. It's quite weird, but mentioned there. Unlike my other videos, there is a timeline of each decade, and we'll be breaking it down of the company's rise and fall and going towards that, and then the ultimate conclusion. Okay, the introduction to the case study. Shopko, also known as Shopko, was a chain of American department stores that spanned from the West Coast to the Midwest. Starting in Green Bay, Wisconsin, the chain expanded throughout the Midwest and expanded to the West Coast in an effort for vigorous expansion for the company. As other retailers such as Walmart, Target, or Kmart were on the race to be America's #1 retailer, Shopko restructured the company by implementing different store designs and better improvement in their internal organization, which saw success in the late 1990s. However, this success would not last long, as the vigorous expansion displayed in the earlier decades would have long-term effects on their distribution problems alongside their debt-to-income ratio, which saw the new Shopko suffer from financial instability that resulted in them shuttering for good. And just as a heads up, I don't know, I just felt really sad making this slide. It was so depressing. It was like I followed this company going towards that. I felt a little bit of sadness going towards the end, which you will see later on, but it had a lot of feelings towards it. So that was the introduction to the company. Ooh, look at that, a new change to the slides. What is Shopko, also known as Shopko, the capital K, which I'll go over right now. And here in the image in the background, Shopko hometown was a concept design for the company, which I'll be going over in the 2010s decade of what it was. What is Shopko, also known as Shopko, capital K? Shopko, also known as Shopko, the previous logo and spelling of the company, was a chain of American department stores which spanned from the West Coast to the Midwest, California to Ohio, including states in between such as Montana, Idaho, Nevada, Utah, etc. So Shopko started off with a capital K, and then when they redesigned their company and logo in 2007, they decided to say, okay, you know what, this is weird. Let's lowercase the K to be Shopko. So that's why I'm using this different spelling variation. So when I talk from the decades of 1962 to 2000, I'll be using the capital K for Shopko. And then when I go from 2007 towards their demise in 2019, I'll be using the undercase K for their local variation. So please don't get confused. This is the reason for the differentiation. Much like other department store chains such as Walmart or Kmart, Shopko sold different items from clothing to household appliances to the local communities. What makes Shopko unique is their pharmacies and optical vision centers. In efforts to connect with the neighboring communities, they specialize in these departments to attract customer attention to their stores. And this wasn't actually mentioned in the slides, but with Shopko, they really diverted their attention. They really attained their attention toward pharmacies and optical centers, and they had so many of them that that was one of their main priorities into bringing customer attention in, which I'll mention throughout the slides. In fact, after Shopko closed, their vision centers live on to this day, displaying their success they once had. The vision centers, as mentioned later on, they were bought out by a different company in the millions, and Shopko Vision Centers still exists for people that need eye exams or they need new frames or contact lenses overall. And those are the two logos. I like the first one better with the red and blue because it looks more retro. The new one gives a more minimal look, but overall it does look pretty nice. But this is what Shopko is. There it is. The timeline. In the background of this image, we see the grand opening of the new Shopko location in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Look how nice it was with the grand opening. Look how many cars are in the parking lot too. Compare this to a modern Kmart or what Shopko was in the 2010s. It's insane. So here we go. Humble starts in the 1960s. So Shopko started as a company in 1961 under James Rubin, who was the founder of the company, and pictured to the right is him with its first store opening in 1962 in Green Bay, Wisconsin. By the end of the 1960s, Rubin had 4 stores in Wisconsin and made an expansion into Michigan with its 5th store opening in Marquette, Michigan. By the time Shopko expanded into Michigan, Shopko's annual sales were approximating to $41 million. With the main goal of remaining humble in the market by opening stores in small populations, Shopko started off in a good position to help build success during this course of time. And to be mentioned, with Shopko, their main attention was towards young men, in which they sold sports in the sports sections, and they also sold hardware such as automotive parts. They weren't really attracting themselves to houseware, but at first they were attracting towards more masculine attention towards selling those items. 1970s. With expansion. In the beginning of the 1970s, with 10 stores under its belt, Shopko was acquired by SuperValu in 1971. SuperValu was one of the largest food wholesalers in the United States during this time. In the following year, James Rubin stepped down as president of Shopko and transferred power over to William J. Tyrrell, while Rubin became vice president of SuperValu. This new ownership under SuperValu helped Shopko was vital towards the long-term goal of vigorous expansion. With a new focus in customer products of selling housewares alongside bringing in customer necessities such as pharmacies and optical centers into their stores, it is safe to say Shopko grew dramatically during this decade. Sales tripled from 1971 towards the end of the decade, and Shopko further expanded the chain to 36 stores throughout Wisconsin and the upper Midwest. So in a span, right, towards the end of the decade, let's say 1978, 1979, beginning in 1962, there was this 16 or 17-year gap. They went from 1 store to 36 stores. Their sales tripled in about 7 to 8 years during this ownership of SuperValu, and things were looking great for these guys, and they were rapidly expanding to have themselves as an established business in the ever-changing department store slash discount store chain. Further growth and increased competition in the 1980s. So continuing with the strategy of vigorous growth from the 1970s, Shopko further expanded their market to the west into states such as Utah and Montana. By the end of the decade, Shopko grew their store base to a little over 85 stores and over $1 billion in revenue with earnings totaling around $60 million. However, we begin to see dominant department store chains like Shopko beginning to re-own customers. Companies such as Walmart, Target, and Kmart all compete in the game to be America's #1 retailer. In fact, Kmart did start as well in 1962, beginning in March 1st as well. Just as a little coincidence. As Shopko's executives and other members of the company realized that measures needed to be taken in order to compete against their competitors, the following decade would talk about new concepts and ideas implemented to help Shopko keep its traction in the retail market. And here we go. This is where the slides keep getting more and more and more informative, because as the time progresses, we see more information on Shopko and what happened, what went wrong, and what went good. So let's talk about the 1990s and their period of success. Vision 2000, restructuring, and success in the 1990s. Beginning in 1991, Shopko was never to be the same compared to its state from the 1970s, or even in 1962, back in Green Bay, Wisconsin. SuperValue, the owner of Shopko since 1971, sold 54% of its stake in Shopko to make it a publicly traded company. With the company sold as a publicly traded company, this gave motivation to the company to ignite the remodel needed in the company. A lot of company things here. The first step to this success is a new CEO. After 2 decades with the company, William Tyrrell was succeeded by Dale Kramer to become president and CEO of Shopko, while Tyrrell remained as chairman, or the newly formed chairman position. As a former pharmacist that began his career coincidentally at Shopko, he had big plans alongside Tyrrell to transform Shopko to challenge the big three, which is Walmart, Target, and Kmart. This challenge from the big three came in a new store concept named Vision 2000. Vision 2000 is actually going to be shown towards the conclusion. It's basically your average remodel, but they had a very certain look that looked nice. Vision 2000 came in a form of a lot of different objectives to rebrand the company. Not only was it a rebrand of the stores, but internal organizational structures as well. Remodeling stores, a different color scheme, updated POS systems, and a new simplified look is some of the aspects of Vision 2000 among many others. Throughout the remainder of the decade, Shopko also expanded its pharmacy section through a new mail order pharmacy system called ProVantage. And alongside having this new mail order pharmacy system and management system with benefits, they also bought out different competitors during the time period, their local competition, to further expand their market in the United States. So Shopko said, this happened? Okay, this is going to happen. They expanded their stores, they remodeled their stores, they improved their infrastructure, they bought out different stores, as mentioned earlier, they made new programs, and they were just going off and off and off and off and off on it, while seeing increase in income and increase in customer population as well. And then at the end of the decade, Shopko also finally got their independence from SuperValue after divesting the other 46% stake in 1997. So Shopko was just so popular, right? It was just insane. And anyone living in California, like, what's Shopko? Well, Shopko only had one store in California, and this store was in Redding, California, and that store closed during the bankruptcy of 2019. But in the Midwest, in Wisconsin primarily, everyone knows Shopko. They're like, Shopko, yeah, they love this department store, right? But this was their major expansion into different markets during the time period, and this was the time for success. However, spoiler alert, going into the thousands, we don't see that much, which is going to be seen right now. Look at all this information. Okay. So from the last slide, upon much more factors not included, Shopko looked to be basking in glory with many changes that have worked out for them. Something I didn't mention, and something that is very interesting, is Payless, out of all companies, are like, hey, Shopko, can I include my stores within your store in a store format? And Payless had stores within Shopko in which you could buy shoes from them. And this was one of their also many successes because they had a different store to sell shoes to customers within it. Think, for example, Kmart Corporation. Kmart Corporation had a company named Mel Disco, and Mel Disco was a subsidiary of Kmart Corporation in which they sold their shoes within their store-in-a-store concept, and customers will buy shoes such as Tom McCain. I hope you guys aren't that young, but Tom McCain was an amazing shoe brand. It still is, in which really nice leather shoes or just walking shoes were made, and that was store-in-a-store. So with Payless with Shopko, that was the same thing. However, like many expansions made in different companies, long-term circumstances took a toll to the company starting in the 2000s. To start, Dale Kramer retired in 1999, and William Podany took the position as president and CEO of Shopko, with a new goal going into the 21st century, including their Beyond 2000 store. So they had Vision 2000. Now they're like, let's go beyond 2000. So they had this different store format. The company decided to acquire Pamita, another chain of discount stores, which was around 148 stores. Shopko also decided to sell their ProVantage idea the same year in order to refocus their goals on adapting to the 21st century business environment. After this acquisition of Pamita, alongside other acquisitions that it made during the 1990s, this brought future headaches for Kramer alongside Podany during the time period. With struggles in the distribution centers to keep it with the demand of all the new stores alongside crushing debt that Shopko has been experiencing, this brought decline to Shopko during this time period. As a result, stores closed and people were furloughed. After 3 years in the company, Podany stepped down as CEO due to poor sales for consecutive quarters, and Sam Duncan was brought in October 2002 to help refocus the goal of Shopko. This focus aimed at opening new concept stores called Shopko Express that focused on competition with drug chains such as CVS Pharmacy and Rite Aid to provide pharmacy services to local communities. However, in 2005, Shopko made a risky decision that played into their decline: an acquisition from a private investment firm. Great job, Shopko. What are you doing now? Now, I'm not blaming the business. Well, I am blaming the business practice because Toys R Us did the same thing. Look what they are now. Now Shopko decided to get bought out by a private investment firm, and now they're going to go down the drain. So in 2005, Sun Capital Inc. Acquired Shopko for a whopping $1.3 billion. Nice step you got there, because that's the price plus the debt. And furthermore, Shopko's real estate was acquired for $815 million. They're like, oh no, Shopko, what are you doing? But this was also part of their decline alongside struggles in their internal organization. They thought this would have made something, but probably not. Then after the acquisition, another CEO change was made in 2006 when they brought in Michael McDonald. Significant changes were made, such as changing the logo from Shopko with a capital K to Shopko with a lowercase k, was brought in to have new light to the company and their image overall. However, this would not mitigate the bleeding of Shopko as they would enter their last decade. This is so sad. I wonder what you guys are thinking probably of this, of having such a vast amount of success in the previous decade, and now they're just declining after that buyout, but they're still expanding and they're declining at the same time. It's so interesting of what's going on right now, but this is the main decline that is occurring. And here we are. Further challenges, bankruptcy and liquidation in 2010s. Man, this is such a sad title, just everything ending at once, right? Starting in 2010, Shopko yet again changed CEOs as McDonald resigned. Under W.P. Jones, Shopko began its quest into the new decade with a recession beginning during the period as well, in the 2008-2009 recession. As a matter of fact, McDonald went to DSW, which is a shoe warehouse outlet throughout the United States. And so W. Paul Jones had the opportunity to run Shopko for how long? Let's see. One of the main changes began in 2012 when Shopko yet again acquired Pamita, and they were sold off in 2007. But Shopko said, hey, let's become friends again, and then they acquired them yet again. After acquiring Pamita, Shopko launches a series of new concept stores called Shopko Hometown with a cost of $80 million to transform these Pamita stores into Shopko Hometown stores. With this concept, these stores will serve communities under 10,000 people with more direct needs and smaller spaces, which are formerly Pamita stores, and these will be located in smaller towns, obviously, than urban towns such as Los Angeles or San Francisco, New York City, Tampa Bay, etc. CEO shifted hands twice more after W. Paul Jones before selling on Russ Steinhorst in 2017. Look how many CEO changes there are. I mean, surely this is part of the factor, right? Just so many leadership changes in that small time frame. You know there's something wrong with their internal organization. So I would count this as one of the factors. I'll mention it in the conclusion. It's not my bias factor, it's just what I've researched, and also of the acquisition in 2005. Up until here, everything except the position change of CEO every 2 years, I'm over exaggerating, but not really, looked fine. However, at the corporate offices in Ashwaubenon, Wisconsin, things looked way worse going in 2018. Say for example, um, say for example, you're in the kitchen, right? And you're making ramen soup. You close the door, something goes wrong, and then your your parents yells, your friend yells, say, "Hey, what's going on in there?" And like, "Oh, nothing, everything's going fine," but the ramen blew up in the microwave, say for example, and you're trying to cover it up. This is the same thing as Shopko. The public and everyone else thinks that everything is going fine, but internally, nothing's going fine. It sucks, right? Um, so Shopko is really suffering from a decline, even though everything looked fine with acquisitions and new hometown stores and etc. So declining sales, growing debt, and outdated practices in the changing business environment troubled Shopko going into the end of the decade. By the end of 2018, Sun Capital looked to sell Shopko. So after 13 years, they said, nah, we're done with this. Let's offload it. But they had trouble finding a buyer. Actually, with this one, Shopko announced 39 stores were closed, and then the day after they said, well, we can't find a buyer, and then that got leaked to the public, and they said, oh no, this isn't good. This is bad for them. As a result of the devastating news to the public and for the company of the store closures and failure to find a buyer from their parent company of Sun Capital private investment firm, Shopko slowly started their path to liquidation through store closings, selling of their parts, their subsidiaries, and the company, starting with their pharmacies in December 2018, as patient records got sold to their main competitors such as Walgreens, CVS, and others. So it was already getting bad. Patients in pharmacies at Shopko saying, oh, I hope everything's all right with my records. And then they say, oh, you're transferring to Walgreens. Like, what's going on with Shopko? Why are my records being sold? Is everything okay? But not really internally. It isn't for them. Um, Shortly after, in January 2019, Shopko ultimately filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy and announced to close a good number of stores, almost 1/3 of the number of stores they had, including the first store they ever opened in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And this was just very tragic for the company. Um, just so much success they had in the 80s and the 90s, and their slow decline in the 2000s going into 2010s. This, in fact, was one of their main store closings they've had, and this was near the very end where they ultimately decided, going into the next slide, in March 2019 to close all of their remaining locations as they failed to find a buyer. This was their main round of closings that they announced, and then shortly after they decided to liquidate all of their stores. So it was just very rapid for them. During their period of success there, they closed maybe 10 or 20 or just individual stores, but this was just so rapid and destructive instead of, say, for example, Sears Holdings Corporations, where they announced 80 stores every 3 or 4 months, and then the bankruptcy hit, boom, you had several hundred stores closing, and then you had bam, bam, just a slow death. But these guys, it was very rapid, but eternally with the debt and failure to find a new market. That's what happened. Um, and as they liquidated, and finally they liquidated in summer of 2019, their optical centers sold off for $8.5 million, where it still exists today. And going back to the original slide of where I talked about pharmacies and optical, Shopko was mainly known for their optical centers because they were one of the first department stores to introduce eye exams and selling prescription glasses to their um, their customers that went into these optical centers. Or for example, with pharmacies, they're one of the first ones, and they did a pretty good darn job on it as well. And so they sold off that business, and now it's pretty successful with the local community nearby. And here we go. The ultimate conclusion of Shopko in this image is the Mason Street store in Green Bay for Shopko, and it's just one of their last days, and you see no merchandise, nothing held back, everything must go, signs on top, and just a really sad interior that is occurring right now. So here we go. Conclusion. Shopko was an American department store chain that began its humble beginnings in Green Bay, Wisconsin in 1962. After having a new owner under SuperValu, Shopko saw vigorous expansion throughout the Midwest and the West of the United States, which boosted their store count and revenue. Due to the changing business environment of rising competition among other department store chains, Shopko revitalized their vision and created new concepts to further expand their company. With continued success through the 1990s, however, the turn of the 21st century onwards did not treat them well due to long-term hardships such as debt and organization due to rapid expansion and the acquisition by a private firm in 2005. As a result of these circumstances, including CEO swaps, see, I had to include that factor because it seems so weird. Shopko, although looking to expand through recent acquisitions, failed to finance their internal organization and ultimately sank in 2019 by closing all their locations in the United States after failure to find a buyer, and from the Chapter 11 bankruptcy in January of that same year. Shopko to this present day serves as a memory through their ongoing operational optical centers under a different owner and through the Midwest and West as a once dominant chain that serves many small communities through the decades. And to the right is an image of the Vision 2000 store, and it looks so crisp and clean. And in the facade, you notice the old logo as seen in the beginning. Also notice the Payless Shoe Source logo as well. So this was during or after 1999 when Payless announced the merger with Shopko. Not really merger, but partnership to have their stores within their stores to sell footwear to their customers. And then he had pharmacy and optical and so forth. So it looks like a really beautiful store with the nature in the background. And it's sad to see stores like this go because they invested so much money, towards the customers, and slowly but surely just faded away. So there is that image of the Vision 2000 store, and that was the ultimate conclusion for the company. Okay, so thank you all again for watching my case study. I hope that during the coming days and coming months, as we are currently in Thanksgiving break, and you see as me, and going into winter breaks, I could upload more case study videos to explore well-known or not so well-known companies or studies such as this one to give you a better grasp of different retail environments and markets overall, because Shopko, you probably barely heard about it first in this video and you got some knowledge out of it, which I'm super hyped about. I'm very excited, but yeah, I just really look forward to it. Again, thank you. Mahalo for watching the video, and I hope all of you have a great Turkey Day and stay well going onward. So thank you very much for viewing this video and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye bye.